Please be seated. The Secretary will read the fourth order.
Ingxoxo-mpikiswano ngevoti yeshumi ezothutho nemisebenzi yoluntu umthetho osayilwayo ulwabiwo-mali wentshona koloni.
I see Minister Grant.
Deputy Speaker, Chairperson and other members of the Standing Committee, Honourable Members, Head of Department Jackie Gooch and Senior Official, visitors. In addressing this House yesterday, I emphasised that a budget is not simply a random collection of numbers, but it is an instrument designed to ensure that a government at any level is able to deliver on its values, aspirations and commitments. As such, the budget is shaped by these commitments on one hand, but also by emerging realities and emerging needs. One such emerging reality in the Western Cape in recent time has been the change in the availability of water and the impact of this reality on virtually all sections of the economy and across all communities. I will return to aspects of this reality during the course of this speech. Another such reality is, of course, the existing overall economic context within which the country as a whole is located at the moment. This reality we are less able to lay at the door of environmental and weather considerations and more at the feet of a national government under the leadership of the former president whose grasp of economic realities was at best sketchy. His parting gift to the country of having it fund a promise of partial free higher education will have a fiscal impact for many years to come, and not necessarily only the sort of impact he may have had in mind when he took the decision. Perhaps the macroeconomic context to which I am referring is best described in an extract from the budget speech of the then Minister of Finance, Malusi Gigaba, just a month ago on the 21st of February. In describing the economic circumstances leading up to the tabling of the national budget, he said, "It would be remiss of me not to acknowledge that last year was particularly difficult for our economy. The year was characterized by slow economic growth, recession, ratings downgrades, and heightened concerns regarding the governance and sustainability of key state-owned companies. It goes without saying that the consequences of these economic realities have had to be absorbed by budgets at both national and provincial levels. In his Western Cape budget speech on the 6th of March, Minister Mayer went to considerable lengths to set out the measures which the province has been able to take to protect the frontline services mandate, particularly in health, education, and social development. These measures are obviously necessary, commendable, and right, once again giving the lie to the official opposition's constant denials of the focus of the overall provincial budget on the poor. Let me now turn to the overall Vote 10 budget for 2018-19. The total amount to be appropriated for Vote 10, Transport and Public Works, is 7.7 billion rand. The increase of 180.8 million on the previous budget is below inflation, and of the total budget, 1.7 billion consists of own revenue. Approximately a quarter of the budget amount is linked to conditional grants. However, as these national conditional grants were almost without exception cut at source, the Department of Transport and Public Works has augmented these amounts from own revenue. The Department of Transport and Public Works, in line with other provincial departments, operates on the basis of various programs. The allocation to the 6 programs within the department are as follows for the 2018-19 financial year. Administration, 197.45 million. Public Works Infrastructure, 1.808 billion. Transport Infrastructure, 3.588 billion. Transport Operations, 1.303 billion. Transport Regulation, 776.1 million. And community-based programs, 55.79 million. As the DTPW is the implementing agent for both education and health infrastructure in the Western Cape, the department is scheduled in the financial year under discussion to spend on behalf of these crucial delivery departments the following amounts: education, 1.2 billion, health, 478.64 million. These amounts for education and health include funds for capital works and scheduled maintenance. The strategic decisions about these education and health infrastructure projects remain with those departments, and the 3 departments cooperate to ensure that their rands go as far as possible without sacrificing quality and safety standards. In healthy economic times, this would simply be good housekeeping. In the existing tough times, cooperation is essential to service delivery. It is one of the great challenges facing any government that as budgets shrink and resources are reduced, more and more people are put under financial and employment pressure, and demand for government services increases. To meet this increased demand for services and support, any responsible government has to minimize wastage and ensure that every cent is well spent. Speaker, having unpacked in broad terms the quantum of Vote 10, it would be remiss of me not to alert this House to 2 factors which can and will reduce the real purchasing power of this budget. Firstly, the recently announced 1% change to VAT has significant implications for DTPW at a point. Secondly, the widespread water limitations will further reduce, in real terms, the disposable budget of the department, as reduced water consumption and water sales begin to have a negative impact on the income of many municipalities. In cases where these municipalities have to increase property rates and service charges to compensate for the loss of income, there will be implications for DTPW as the department responsible for rates and charges on provincial properties. Water is also an essential component in construction and road building. Deputy Speaker, Minister Mayer has correctly stressed the importance of investment in public infrastructure for the provision of services as well as for underpinning economic growth and providing jobs. The budget amounts I've already referred to for public works and transport infrastructure, as well as education and health, speak for themselves. The proper development and maintenance of infrastructure needs to be understood as critical in leveraging the potential of a country and in securing effective, efficient, and fit-for-purpose service delivery. While new assets are obviously required to support growth, considerable resources must be invested in maintaining the existing infrastructure portfolio and renewing it where necessary. A Brookings Institute report puts the overwhelming logic of proper maintenance simply in 3 rules as follows. Firstly, poorly maintained infrastructure increases costs. Secondly, maintenance is an investment with a very high rate of return. And thirdly, deferred maintenance makes fixing later more expensive and is a genuine debt burden on future generations. In this regard, it is instructive to look at the total replacement costs of two classes of assets for which the DTPW is responsible as follows. Firstly, our road network. The replacement cost is 102.8 billion rand. Secondly, 8.3 million square meters of property portfolio with a replacement cost of 105.8 billion, together just under 250 billion rand. My department has, over a number of years, applied the principle of the importance of maintenance to our road network, and more particularly to that of the network which carries the overwhelming flow of traffic. This approach has paid dividends time and again. The cost of having to replace any infrastructure instead of maintaining it to lengthen its useful life is simply short-sighted economics. Where new investment is made in the road network, it is usually where it best supports economic growth. A full list of planned road and other infrastructure projects over the MTEF is, as members will know, available in the estimates of provincial revenue and expenditure, the so-called Blue Book. Deputy Speaker, while on the subject of the sensible use and preservation of our assets, it is also encouraging that the findings of our latest property efficiency report show continued improvement in our utilization of both owned and leased-in property used by the Western Cape Government. The performance matrix analyses analyzes efficiency, quality, and the environment in which the building operates by concentrating on cost, consumption of natural resources, and space utilization. While time does not allow me to unpack the significant data in this report, it is informative to table a few trends as follows. Firstly, workspace use efficiency has increased by a further 7.6%. Secondly, energy consumption is down by a further 6%. Overall consumption in our government-used buildings is 158 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, as opposed to a private sector average of 246 kilowatt hours per square meter per annum. This is indeed significant. Thirdly, water consumption is down by a further 20%. Here I must stress that this decline in consumption predates the introduction of further reduction measures associated directly with the current water situation, which other budget debaters have alluded to in this House. Deputy Speaker, as Minister of Transport in this province, it would be remiss of me not to refer to the continued, abysmal, and dangerous rail commuter service provided to the residents of the Western Cape, and particularly of Cape Town, by the national government through its state-owned entity, PRASA. Members will be aware of the ongoing governance challenges which have developed over time. Hardly a week goes by without media reports of further dubious procurement deals, board-level clashes, and management instability. I will now be working with the third National Cabinet Minister of Transport in a space of 6 months. PRASA continues to be governed by an interim board, and although there has been a call for nominations to a new PRASA board, The closing date for such nominations is such that this new board will be appointed only after yet another interim board is put into place for a further period. This does not bode well for the 600,000 odd commuters reliant on a safe, dependable service. I must emphasize that my department has assisted Metro Rail Western Cape and PRASA in every way legally possible over the last few years to stabilize and improve services. In this regard, members will find in Vote 10 a provision of 16 million to be transferred to the City of Cape Town in the new financial year as the province's share of the costs of an agreed to rail safety security initiative involving the province, the City of Cape Town, PRASA, and the Cape Town Chamber of Commerce. As Minister of Transport, I will be chairing a working group of these various entities with the intention of supporting a PRASA turnaround strategy aimed at improving the safety, reliability, and cost of the rail commuter service, a service that is essential to the well-being of hard-working and often poor residents of this province. Given the technical and practical nature of much of the work of DTPW, it is entirely appropriate that it continues to implement the National Youth Service Programme aimed at unemployed youth across all regions of the Western Cape. The department has invested significant resources in addressing shortages in critical and scarce skills in construction-related trades. The department continues to train and to test Red Seal artisans in electrical and welding trades. The strategic invention forms part of the Western Cape apprenticeship game changer. In addition, during the 2017-18 financial year, the department trained 216 unemployed youth over a 12-month period in various leaderships such as plumbing, carpentry, electrical wiring, masonry, welding, and roadworks. In 2018-19, the financial year, the National Youth Service Programme will be in its 10th year of implementing skills interventions in the Western Cape. The NYS Phase 10 commenced in February 2018 with 210 learners across the Western Cape in the following trades: air conditioning and refrigeration in Eden, plant operator in Eden, welding in the Cape Winelands and Metro, masonry in the Cape Winelands, West Coast, Overberg and the Metro, carpentry in the West Coast and Overberg, electrical in the Central Karoo and Metro, and finally plumbing in the Central Karoo and Metro. The Western Cape DTPW Skills Development Programme was recognised by a runner-up award at the National Achievers Awards in the category Best Public Service Programme. Well done to the department. Then, Deputy Speaker, there's the Misaki Sizwe Bursary and Professional Development Programme, worked together to address skills shortages to drive economic growth through infrastructure development, whilst creating a conducive
for 2018-2019 financial year. The administration program ensures that this department implements a number of programs to service delivery and infrastructure that improve the socio-economic outcomes and create safe empowerment and empowered connected communities. This infrastructure deliverance, Deputy Speaker, is when we took the oversight visit as a standing committee. We visited Atlantis, and we saw the number of schools that have been delivered for the benefit of accessible and quality education to the kids around the area. A school like Parkview, which we visited, and the standing committee on its oversight visit was pleased. Vestelfier School was also visited by the standing committee to check this service delivery that we are talking about, that a quality service delivery is being implemented, is enjoyed by the communities. The Standing Committee was pleased by the work well done by the department. But it doesn't also, Deputy Speaker, not considered by the Standing Committee that there are a number of infrastructure developments that need to be done by the department or other schools. When we visited as well the school in Philippi called Kwafaku, the Standing Committee was never pleased by what it witnessed there, with kids exposed to asbestos, TB, and the quality of the environment for the school was not conducive for a quality education. This is one of the issues as the Standing Committee that we raised with the department. And we believe that something is going to be done with the infrastructure deliverance program. The DA in the Western Cape, Deputy Speaker, with its programs show that where it governs better. Administration is only one cog contributing to how the DA governs. When driving around South Africa, it is clear that comparatively, the provincial government in other areas lag far behind to what in the Western Cape is being done. The DA-led government recognizes and takes the necessary precaution to ensure that our roads are continuously resurfaced and preserved, and they, when necessary, build new bridges to prevent the traffic congestion. This year, Deputy Speaker, 3.2 billion has been allocated to this infrastructure. Various initiatives such as the upgrading of roads from gravel to surface standard and the improvement of dangerous locations are also important in decreasing road fatalities and improving road safety. Deputy Speaker, I commend the department as well. It increases its spending on provincial roads by almost 200 million over the next 3 years. This department infrastructure is supported through the annual Road Asset Management Plan, RAMP, which maintains provincial roads and outlines plans and current investment for the road network. Our commitment to improving our roads through our pro-poor budget underlies why the Western Cape government roads outshine all other provinces. This is made possible by the third program, Transport Infrastructure, which has been allocated over 3.6 billion this year. Deputy Speaker, the department's second program, Public Works Infrastructure, has an allocated budget of almost 2 billion. From this program, I welcome that the department is committed to accessible and inclusive infrastructure. This is demonstrated as the department has set aside over 6.6 million for the infrastructure related to the persons with disabilities. Deputy Speaker, allow me to focus particularly on the next two programs. As there is a public outcry against the metro rail current crisis, which affects the majority of the people of the Western Cape residents who commute to and fro using the same services. If it is not yet clear why the DA governs better and why our budget is pro-poor, then let me put this. The fourth program, Transport Operation, is allocated over 1.3 billion. Through it, the Provincial Sustainable Transport Program will be implemented to maintain and sustain public transport and improve public access. This aids the poor majority who rely on public transport in the province. Deputy Speaker, just compare the DA-led Western Cape My City bus services with the state asset entity Metro Rail under PRASA. Whilst Metro Rail can barely keep its central line open, My City and 2 express routes between Cape Town, Central, Khayelitsha, and Mitchells Plain have nearly doubled in the past 2 years, with more than 200 journeys recorded in November 2017. Whilst the ANC is failing in its residents in keeping its promises, the DA delivers. And we need as well, Deputy Speaker, to sensitize our communities that these my city buses and the infrastructure that are being provided in our communities should be treasured. It is not reasonable and rational for any poor, so-called poor service delivery and anger communities that are having, that they ventilate their anger by destroying their assets that they are meant for them. That is very much irrational. You cannot burn your house because you are having the problem with the rats in your house. This DA-led province has championed the Western Cape Provincial Road Traffic Administration Amendment Bill, which aims, among others, improve the road safety. This constitutes the 5th program transport regulation that has been allocated over 810 million. Deputy Speaker, we cannot rely on the national government alone to make our roads safe, as that government is inept and unable to even manage the fine backlogs. Deputy Speaker, these two programs demonstrate how well the DA-led Western Cape government manages its own transport program. This government prioritizes transport maintenance and road safety. This effectiveness is managing the province's transport is reason enough for why Metro Rail should be put under the province mandate and then taken out of the ANC maladministration and poor service delivery. Because where DA is in government, it governs well. If Metro Rail was under the department's mandate of the Western Cape, residents in the Western Cape would not dread their commute to work, but rather feel safe and assured that they would reach their destination on time, not to mention that Metro Rail's failure has congested our roads, as its passengers have dropped by 50% from over 675,000 passengers in 200 to an estimated 360,000 passengers in 2017, as they are now forced to use taxis and their own vehicles to get to work. Speaker, I need to emphasize as well that the responsibility and the failure of Metro Rail is that Metro Rail cannot rely on the police to provide them with safety. They need to have their own police enforcement so that they guard their asset, they guard their commuters, so that anything they are talking about, which is vandalism, theft, damage of property, is secured. But it cannot be solely and exclusively be the responsibility of the SAPs. Maybe as well as we are having the problem with SAPs, must fall under the Western Cape administration. Speaker, the DA in the Western Cape strives to empower and grow all of its communities. The final program is community-based and it is allocated over 62.7 million. Not only does this department promote inclusivity by recruiting female contractors for construction, but the construction industry itself supports sustainable economic and employment growth by encouraging skills and training programs. Last year alone, Deputy Speaker, the DA in the Western Cape provided over 37,000 work opportunities. This year will top that number and provide over more than 40,000 opportunities. This is a testament to the DA's ability to deliver infrastructure and services that are proper as they improve socio-economic outcomes and safety. Where DA governs, it governs better. Speaker, the DA governs better, reprioritizing the department's budgets in this program where it has helped respond to the current drought and the economic climate. This approach is necessary as there has been budget cuts by the ineffective national government to reduce the sustainability and above the DA-led programs that are successful. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, I fully support this budget and would like to thank the department, the MEC, the HOD,
Order. Honourable Lekker. Honourable Lekker, please contain yourself.
I fully support this budget, Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank the department, the MEC, HOD, and the staff for their hard work, which has delivered a transport system inclusive of the provincial and roadway network and necessary social and economic infrastructure needed to improve the lives of all those living in the province. And with this, I say that we support this budget. Thank you.
The Honourable Dugmore.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker.
Order.
Deputy
Order.
Speaker.
You may continue.
Thank you. Deputy Speaker, one would notice from the report on the deliberations of the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works on the budget for the 2018-2019 year that the ANC has recorded its objection to this vote. This was not done because we believe that the department has been prejudiced in the allocation of just over 7.729 billion to vote 10. It is clear that the Western Cape allocations from National Treasury for infrastructure were not punitive, but they were consistent with cuts in all other provinces. Deputy Speaker, our objection, in fact, is based on the fact that we could not find either in this annual performance plan or in the budget itself examples of a genuine commitment to use the resources allocated to this department to advance the transformation, redress, and inclusive growth agenda that our province actually needs. This department, Deputy Speaker, is not only about transport and public works. It is also about property management. This portfolio is about how the province utilizes the property portfolio, both land and buildings, to advance redistribution and redress. If one wants to find an example of how the Democratic Alliance is unwilling to advance transformation and redress where they govern, one needs to look no further than this 2018-2019 annual performance plan of this department. You will not find a coherent plan to use provincial assets to effect redress. Instead, we have the cherry picking of a few sites, like the former Conradi Hospital as an example of a so-called better living model. So many announcements have been made as to the commencement of this project, and just as many deadlines have been broken in regard to the commencement of this project. Deputy Speaker, ever since the resolution of the ANC's National Conference at Nasrec, which called for the expropriation without compensation of land to be used as one of the mechanisms to implement land redistribution in a manner which does not impact negatively on food security and the agricultural sector, the DA has tried its best to resist and undermine this resolution of the African National Congress. One of the arguments they have used, and it relates to this budget, Deputy Speaker, is that they support the South African Constitution and that all initiatives regarding land redistribution should be implemented in terms of the South African Constitution. And this, Deputy Speaker, is where the DA hypocrisy stands exposed, because our Constitution, and this also impacts on the annual performance plan, calls for a law of general application to govern the expropriation of property in South Africa, which affects properties in the Western Cape as well. And the National Department of Public Works initiated a process as far back as 2015 to pass a bill which would guide expropriation in our country. And as a standing committee, Deputy Speaker, we were part of conducting public hearings in our province. Now, just as the majority of those at the public hearings on the Children's and Environmental Commissioner supported setting up these commissions, both of them, the Environmental and the Children's Commissioner, also those that attended the public hearings on the expropriation bill, which impacts on our province, supported the need for an expropriation bill at that time. But, Speaker, it was the MEC's party, the DA, that objected to the expropriation bill then, when the issue of expropriation without compensation was not even on the agenda. So it is clear that the DA was then, and is still now, opposed to any attempts to implement the redress provisions of our Constitution. They made every effort to oppose and delay the passing of the expropriation bill, which would have assisted us in the province, even when the principle of expropriation without compensation was not on the agenda. It is this fight back and resistance to transformation which actually exacerbates land hunger and frustration in our country. Now we see that the DA has resorted to typical swart gevaar tactics in its attempt to instill fear and anger against our ANC government's attempts to advance and deepen the transformation agenda through land redistribution. Just before the registration weekend, the DA sent out millions of SMSs, which we didn't ask for, which said ANC and EFF working together, and these are the words, to take all private homes and land. You can only stop this if you're registered. Just like Tony Leon's Fight Back campaign, essentially code for Fight Blacks, this campaign was a blunder by the DA, because as in our province, when we look at this particular annual performance plan, the majority of South Africans understand the need to implement the redistribution of land, and attempts to whip up fear and anger will work for a while in the short term, but they will fail to stop the renewal and transformation project of the ANC. When voters vote in 2019, they will have a clear choice, either to vote for the ANC and ensure transformation of a society which will ensure less inequality, greater ownership of the economy by the black majority and greater prosperity, or vote for the DA and reverse transformation and to protect apartheid-acquired privileges. That's what the choice is about. And unfortunately, this annual performance plan does not indicate to us in any way that there's a move to seriously redress and to use the property portfolio of this provincial government to advance transformation. Now, we as the ANC Deputy Speaker are committed to accelerating and consolidating the processes of economic transformation and land reform. And wasn't it ironic, Deputy Speaker, that when our colleague, Comrade Normian Kondlo, raised the issue of ownership, which also applies to this portfolio of property, of wine farms, obviously the MEC for Agriculture was prompted with a series of SMSs about all these wine labels. And that is essentially the difference between the transformation agenda of the ANC, which talks about ownership of land and property, whereas what the MEC of the DA espouses is one where it's sufficient for black people to own labels, but not actually to own the means of production themselves. And that has come out very, very clearly. So the expropriation bill, which impacts on our province and on this vote, and that particular bill happened at a time when expropriation without compensation was not yet on the agenda. They're not about punishing white South Africans. This is about the best way to effect land redistribution and correct the injustice of the past. And we would expect our province to begin to be proactive in this department, to use our portfolio to effect redress. The basic narrative, Deputy Speaker, is that land reform is a national imperative. We need, as a province, to unite in seeking solutions to this original sin, the dispossession by colonialism of those who owned the land. Instead of assisting, this provincial government, and indirectly this department, is actually promoting fear and racism. The ANC has a historic mission to effect redress, and the Freedom Charter remains our guide to this, and we will do this responsibly. We are firm in our support for the clauses of the Freedom Charter, which say South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, and the land shall be shared amongst all those who work it. In his SONA address of 2018, President Ramaphosa clearly stated that we are determined that expropriation without compensation should be implemented in a way that increases agricultural production, improves food security, and ensures that the land is returned to those from whom it was taken under colonialism and apartheid. He continued to say that government will undertake a process of consultation to determine the modalities of the implementation of this resolution. This clearly shows that this will be done in a responsible and a participatory manner. The DA's fight back, which is clear to see in this budget, and its lack of commitment to using our properties in this province to advance transformation, is to maintain the apartheid spatial development patterns and to spread a message of fear. Deputy Speaker, the majority of South Africans, and I would argue the majority of black and white South Africans, want redress. The majority of South Africans want justice. We need to isolate those who resist transformation and want to preserve, in fact, apartheid's legacy of spatial planning. We need to condemn the fear mongers. The National Development Plan seeks to build a capable and a developmental state, as well as to unite all South Africans around a common program. But this department, and we must acknowledge, has identified some of the impediments to achieving the objectives of the NDP, and they are outlined in page 6 of the department's annual performance plan. They include the lack of growth and jobs, infrastructure development, as well what they refer to as the impact of apartheid spatial development. But by referring to those impediments, Deputy Speaker, not doing anything in your budget and in your annual performance plan to deal with that, you are simply entrenching apartheid, what could be described as another form of state capture. Here in the Western Cape, we have provincial property, which could help to redress, but the DA has no plan and political will, but he's actually trying to sell our crown jewels, like Tafelberg, to private interests, and we have never heard the truth, Deputy Speaker, about the DA's relationship with Saul Logenberg and with Fulcon. The Premier and this MEC have never investigated allegations of a conflict of interest regarding the sale of Tafelberg and the role of certain consultants and the private interests which they actually have and how those have impacted on these matters. It is clear that this budget continues, in fact, in terms of its property mandate, to actually preserve the spatial development patterns and preserve the tale of what is essentially two cities, one unequal and poor and one privileged and mainly white. This budget clearly shows that the DA is against transformation agenda which the national government is trying to drive, and it's been made clear to us through the disposing of prime pockets of land instead of using those to advance integrated human settlements close to the city, which is what one would expect from a developmental state and a provincial government in the Western Cape. It's clear to us that the uncaring attitude of the DA and the attempt to sabotage a genuine attempt to redress dispossession and to implement land redistribution can be seen in the ineffectiveness of the Provincial Property Committee established in 1998. We heard in our discussions during the budget vote and before that the regulations promulgated in 1998 which guide the work of the Provincial Property Committee have never been updated. Since 2009, the Western Cape Land Administration law requires that this House receives a report annually about provincial properties, their disposal, the plans. This House, and you would confirm this, Deputy Speaker, has not once since 2009 ever received a report from the Provincial Property Committee. So what is actually happening here? It appears that there's an attempt to effectively manipulate and control the disposal of provincial property and not be transparent so that the people of the Western Cape can actually can participate in how those assets should be used to advance the redistribution program. We were informed that there is an draft annual report and it is now being edited. The reality is, like the Environmental Commissioner, like the Children's Commissioner, since 2009, there's been a basic defiance of the Constitution and of the Provincial Land Administration Act, which guides this particular province. And essentially, this is an attempt to undermine national legislation which governs the approach to property, where one has to offer property to sister departments, where one has to make sure that in disposing of assets you advance black economic empowerment, effect redress. So essentially, they have not amended this land administration bill because they are actually resisting the provisions of national law in regard to how property should be disposed of. I think it's shocking, Deputy Speaker, that in a budget which is supposed to advance a transformative agenda and to provide, in the words of the DA, so-called equal opportunities, that in effect one of the prime ways that we could be using in this budget and in the annual performance plan to advance redress is to actually redress the properties by giving ownership to historically disadvantaged people through leasehold and through development of integrated settlements. This is not here in this budget, and it is very clear that for those reasons, Deputy Speaker, we can never be part of a budget where this state, instead of being developmental, in fact is using property to uphold and preserve privileges inherited by an unjust system of colonialism and of apartheid in the past. And the fact that we have a Premier who speaks up colonialism effectively means that it's no issue for the Democratic Alliance to sell off a property like Tafelberg, which actually kicks sand and treads on the victims of colonialism who could have actually benefited from using a public resource for integrated housing close to their places of work in Seapoint. This is essentially the agenda, and that agenda was exposed by the way MEC Windy responded to Nomi Mkondlo, and this content also exposes the actual agenda of the Democratic Alliance as implemented by this MEC for Transport and Public Works. One would talk the language of empowerment, but when it comes to an essential component of economic transformation, which is transforming the ownership patterns of here, is where it starts. There's no debate about that, and we would support those efforts. But what we do not agree with is that this notion that it doesn't really help us so much to have more visible policing on our. There's this almost this notion, no, you know, that we can do this with electronic surveillance. We can do this with focusing on driver behavior. That's important, but there's nothing that actually helps getting driver behavior to where it should be than the visible presence of traffic officers across the province. And this budget clearly doesn't indicate a commitment to that pillar, which we believe would contribute towards actually helping reducing the number of fatalities on our road. And for these reasons, Deputy Speaker, we are not able to support this budget as much as we would like.
Thank you, Member. Your time has expired. Honourable Joseph.
Point of order.
Point of order.
Yeah.
Yes.
Member Dagmo made an unparliamentary statement, Deputy Speaker, by saying that the Premier and the Minister has not declared their interest in Fulcon and other private companies. I'd like you to check that on the Hansard. It's an unparliamentary statement. It is a false, misleading statement, and if he has the facts, then he must come forward with that information.
Order. I hear what the member is saying, but the chair cannot justify and say that is true or not true. So some other processes must be followed to follow that up.
Deputy Speaker, that's why I made a request to refer to Hansard.
Yeah. I don't want a discussion of this thing. This is not for the chair to decide. You've made the statement, and it's a political statement which must be followed up differently.
Could I just address you? I just want your information and for the sake of the House, I did not refer to, I referred to the fact that they had not investigated these allegations.
Thank
you.
you.
Very clear what I said.
Thanks. We dispose of that issue. Minister Grant to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I'm critically aware that I stand between this House and the weekend and jazz and various other things, so I will be as brief as I possibly can whilst not abrogating my responsibility in replying to this debate. But let me start off by thanking everyone who participated in it. And I'm also sad that our friends from the EFF and ACDP are also not here today, and they've been conspicuous by their absence. I really want to thank Member Inanna and the members of the Standing Committee for their robust oversight over the past year, and I'm sure that it will continue in the year to come. I also want to say that in looking at the numbers, Member Inanna, about rail, whenever I talk at a national or even a City of Cape Town level, I prefer to look at potential in life. And actually, if we had 120 train sets, we could have up to 1.4 million passengers on rail, and we could reduce substantially the congestion and the economic wastage of people's time and money on congested roads. But we will continue to do whatever we can through our Transport and Rail Safety Task Team to do and look for solutions. Even though that is in the national mandate, it is in the interests of our commuters, particularly our poor commuters. We simply have to fix rail by all means possible, including a contribution from the private sector. Then it was remiss of me not to also thank the department for their 6th clean audit. And in listening to the criticism from the opposition benches, generally, I wish they had been party when we met in the last quarter of last year to look strategically at our budget in the year ahead, to see how we can really address and do within our means of providing for what the state needs, particularly in infrastructure and in health and in social development, where we spend more than 80% of our infrastructure budget on those which are frontline delivery services. So I cannot understand the cacophony of sound from the opposition benches in the southern part of this House about the criticism of the DA government that we're not interested in redress or basically giving opportunities to the people of the Western Cape. I reject it with contempt. Then let me talk about the one thing that I think I should address, that the Honourable Member Dugmore made, a comment he made, and that is about the Land Administration Property Act, which actually was promulgated in 1998, not in 2009. So the big question is, what happened between 2002 and 2009 when they were in charge? And let me also tell you, Deputy Speaker, what we are doing. We are bringing new legislation to book, and we are also looking at the policy in terms of the disposal of our property. And when we are good and ready, and it's been properly researched through the normal channels, Cabinet, our caucus, the DA policy, they haven't won the election. They cannot tell us how to govern. And I'm sick and tired of their nonsense. And I will always be receptive to new ideas and good ideas. But if things are fundamentally different to our values as a political party, and things must not stand in the way of the economic and social development of this province. And my department realizes, and it's not me, it's our team sitting in that box. They know what the priorities are. And I commend them for the work that they do.
Order, order.
So, Deputy Speaker, in closing, I've already thanked my department in the main part of my speech. And in closing, I must also thank my ministry members who are here sitting up in the gallery, because whilst, you know, their contribution is absolutely vital in ensuring high-quality teamwork between the Ministry, the Department of Transport and Public Works, and transversally across the entire government of the Western Cape. So I want to thank my ministry, and I want to thank the department and my colleagues, and basically recommend this budget to this House. Thank you.
Order. That concludes the debate on this vote. That also concludes the business for the day. The House is adjourned.